By the late 1980s, the small, Midwest-based First Bank System Incorporated was in dire straits. Corporate excess and chronic underperformance had left the $10 billion company floundering, barely profitable, and running out of time. But a hero would soon emerge from above. Enter John Grundhofer, a seasoned banking executive recruited to turn the ship around. Through strategically executed layoffs, the elimination of employee perks and bonuses, and a complete restructuring of the company, Grundhofer transformed a barely surviving institution into a thriving one, earning the gratitude of shareholders and the quiet hatred of almost everyone else. And in November of 1990, that resentment would coalesce into something far more dangerous. As a shadowy antagonist emerged from the darkness, hell-bent on ripping his hard-earned victory away. Welcome back to episode 45 of the podcast that's been called the Fox News of Podcasts, because we're fair and balanced. My name's Nate, and with me again after a few months is Kyle. Kyle, what's going on, man?
Not much. Just super glad to be back on this fair and balanced podcast.
Before we begin, just some quick housekeeping. So I'm not going to be home for the rest of February, but the show is going to continue on when I come back home in March. So, Kyle, do you have anything that you'd like to say up front?
No, just happy to be back. Glad to get the call.
So what are we going to be talking about tonight, man?
Another one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries, just like we always do.
Yeah.
This one's a real whodunit.
Is it? What can you tell me about it?
Oh, not much. That's the point of an unsolved mystery. There's not much to tell. I don't want to give anything away.
That makes sense. So before we begin, I got to give a shout out to tonight's sources. Tonight's episode was brought to you by Unsolved Mysteries Season 6, Episode 8, the LA Times, DesertSun.com, UPI.com, and the New York Times. All sources can be found in the episode description. All right, Kyle, let's get into this one. What if I asked you, dear listener, what do you think the world's oldest profession is? What would you say? Prostitute? Hunter-gatherer? Warrior? Contrary to popular belief, the world's oldest profession isn't prostitution, but rather, it's simply mastering the art of waiting for somebody else to do all the hard work involved in acquiring resources, and then liberating those resources from said person through various means. From clubbing a guy over the head for his mammoth meat back in caveman times, to snake oil salesmen of the Wild West, to crypto rug pull shitcoin scams of today, the face of thievery and skullduggery may have changed and evolved throughout the ages, but people have not. Today's story is about a man who tried to do what countless others have attempted since the dawn of time: acquire a lifetime supply of resources through ignoble means. The only problem? The operation was doomed from the start. The entire plan was as cartoonish as it was stupid.
We take you now to a time and place far more innocent than now. New Year's Day, 1939, when a New Year's miracle occurred in the City of Angels. John F. Grundhofer was born in Los Angeles on this day, arriving not in a basket flown by a stork, but presumably a biologically born baby who was destined to, one day, become a role model to the underprivileged and a pillar of the community. John F. Grundhofer, or Jack as he was known, was raised under humble circumstances. The son of a bartender father and a housekeeper mother, even from an early age he understood hard work wasn't optional. He took on early morning newspaper routes and stockboy jobs while attending prestigious Catholic schools. Also, his family wouldn't lose their home. Even as a young man, he balanced responsibility with ambition, earning a baseball scholarship and mowing lawns to pay his way through Loyola University, before concluding that his true calling lay in helping others by entering finance. He started out as a credit analyst, but he later went back to school at night to earn an MBA in finance from the University of Southern California, setting the stage for what would become a decades-long career in banking. Along the way, he became a respected business figure and philanthropist, serving on numerous corporate and nonprofit boards. Grundhofer's rise through the banking world was steady and noble, and his leadership style focused on cost control. After time as a regional manager and executive at Union Bank, and then as a senior leader at Wells Fargo, he was recruited in 1990 to lead First Bank System, Inc., a roughly $10 billion Minneapolis-based regional bank. Under his leadership, he revamped the entire company and made more than 35 strategic acquisitions, including the pivotal purchase of U.S. Bancorp. One of his first actions as CEO was the heroic decision to lay off over 1,800 of the nearly 11,000 employees in the company who had no choice but to find some other company to be useless in.
Diane Merrifield, an ex-bank vice president who was fired in March of 1990, said, quote, "No one was trying to help Jack understand the importance of what we were performing," end quote. She later added that she and her colleagues were told to be at their desks by 8 a.m. one morning, and they were each called into a room, one by one, and fired. Quote, "It was sort of like bringing sacrificial lambs to the slaughter," end quote, she said. Mr. Grundhofer even started tracking employees by social security number to make sure that whoever he fired stayed fired and could never come back to the company in some other position. However, you may be surprised to learn, dear listener, that these mass firings did not make him a popular guy at the time, and, consequently, may have painted a target on his back. Just 11 months into his tenure as CEO, a rogue opportunist, a common scoundrel, or, perhaps, simply a butthurt former wage slave, emerged from the shadows and attempted to forcibly extract from Mr. Grundhofer his hard-earned U.S. currency. An ignoble monster who, assumedly, was never taught that preying upon people's livelihoods in the pursuit of comically large sums of money is wrong, unless it's done legally.
Monday, November 19th, 1990, 8:10 a.m. John Grundhofer was pulling his dark gray four-door 1990 Mercedes Benz into his designated parking space in the underground parking garage at Pillsbury Center in downtown Minneapolis, Minnesota. Unbeknownst to our protagonist John, today was not going to be just another long day of firing people at the office. Instead, an ominous, shadowy figure was looming inside the parking garage, waiting for him. As he exited his vehicle, a tall, overweight, middle-aged man wearing a trench coat, a bucket hat, and thick glasses suddenly emerged from behind a nearby concrete pillar and walked up to him. "John, you're going to have to go with me," he said, or words to that effect. Unsure of who this man was, John asked him what he meant. The mysterious man repeated his demand and told him to get back in the car. When John refused to cooperate, the man pulled out a handgun from his coat pocket. "This is Carl, and you are going with me," or something to that effect.
John remained calm and played along with the man's demands. That is, until he sensed an opening, after which he sprung for the man's gun, and a brief scuffle and wrestling match ensued. Unfortunately for John, though, he lost the match, and the man regained control of the firearm. It was moments later when a third man, Jeff Rasmussen, heard the shouting and commotion and saw two men rolling around on the ground. Initially, Jeff thought somebody was being mugged, and so he ran over to help. But when he was about halfway there, the two men stood up from the ground and started playing it cool, like they knew each other. But then the man suddenly brandished his gun and told Jeff that he'd better get out of there. Jeff took the hint and sprinted for the elevator, terrified. With no more cards left to play, John did as the man asked and got back in the car, while the man climbed into the back seat. All in all, from start to finish, the ordeal thus far only took 3 minutes. Wow, man, so what can you tell us about this so far?
So, John Grundhofer just thinks it's going to be a normal day. He rolls up to work in his brand new Mercedes. He's got his own personal private parking spot with his name on it, right? But when he gets out of the car, a dude in a trench coat, a sketchy-looking, overweight dude, rolls up to him, pulls a gun, and says, "Get back in the car. you are coming with me. This is now a hostage/kidnapping type situation.
Yeah, and so it was like 3 minutes prior to this happening, he just thought it was a normal day. Everything's fine. Everything's good. And then some guy rolls up to him, pointing a gun at him.
Well, it's a crazy world, man. Sometimes you have days like that, yep. I guess. The kidnapper ordered John to drive east towards Wisconsin at gunpoint and handcuff some sort of makeshift bomb or dynamite to his left wrist, warning him that if he tries anything else, he'll blow him up. Right around this time, a passerby in the parking garage noticed a piece of paper on the ground and picked it up. Written on it was what authorities called a cheat sheet, which was a handwritten, step-by-step list of everything he was going to order John Grundhofer to do during the kidnapping. For this reason, the authorities do not believe the kidnapper to be a seasoned criminal mastermind, but rather an amateur. Richard Lind, an FBI agent, told the TV show Unsolved Mysteries, quote, "I believe the kidnapper is not really a professional criminal. It would seem to me that if you're going to commit that kind of a crime, that you could basically do it off the top of your head, if you will." End quote.
Can you imagine being so worthless that you have to like write down every step that you're going to take while kidnapping somebody? Like you have to refer to a cheat sheet on the fly while you're doing this?
I mean, kind of, right? I mean, because I've got a pretty poor memory, and because of my job and all the steps involved in certain things, like I do take a lot of notes, but at the same time, if I was planning to commit such a crime, I would make the notes, review them over and over and over until I had them locked into my head, and I would not take a note list or a cheat sheet with me.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe I'm just built differently, but for me, I would just go over the plan in my head over and over. I wouldn't need to like write this down and like bring a physical list with me. It's a piece of evidence that either A, you can leave at the scene, or B, you can get caught with, and then you get caught red-handed with a list showing everything you intend to do to this poor guy.
Yeah, could you imagine just being pulled over by the cops when it's all said and done and they search you and you just have a folded up piece of paper and inside it says steps for kidnapping?
Yeah, it's cartoonish.
Yeah.
By 8:45 a.m., the pair were crossing over the state line into Wisconsin, and by about 8:57 a.m., the abductor forced Grundhofer to pull over into a secluded rest area in St. Croix County. From here, the abductor handed John a note containing his demands and instructed him to read the message written in the note verbatim. John carefully considered the two options he had at this point. He could either A, call his secretary from his car phone to relay the gunman's demands, or B, get shot. After careful consideration, John decided that the best course of action at this moment was to choose option A.
Wow, do you remember car phones? Like before there were cell phones?
I remember being a little kid and riding around in some guy's car that had a car phone, and I remember thinking that it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. My next door neighbor's dad had one in his work truck. It was mind blowing, right? Because it didn't look like a cell phone, right? It had a cord attached to a receiver, like you would in a house.
Yeah, it was like coming out of the center. The center, what do you call that thing?
The center console?
Yeah, the center No, I mean, not the dashboard area. I mean, just like the armrest area.
Yeah. The kidnapper's demands were simple, yet suggested to law enforcement that he was possibly a dunce. Within the note was a scripted line which John was to read aloud while relaying the demands. Quote, "I am a hostage of a group called Parents Against Drugs," end quote. $3 million were to be paid out in cash in various denominations of $100, $500, and $1,000 bills. $1 million in hundreds, $1 million in 500s, and somehow $1 million in $1,000 bills. John's secretary, upon receiving the ransom phone call, immediately relayed the demands up in the chain of command, and the wages began trying to gather up the ransom money. Richard Lind of the FBI told Unsolved Mysteries, quote, "A professional criminal would never ask for a $1,000 bill. You don't exactly take a $1,000 bill and go to a convenience store, buy a cup of coffee, and then ask for change. There aren't too many people that carry $1,000 bills with them," end quote. Shortly after the phone call, the abductor realized that he had lost his so-called cheat sheet, which contained step-by-step instructions on how he would carry out his genius plan, causing him to become angry.
So I want to ask you, man, what do you make of this fictitious group called Parents Against Drugs? Why do you think he chose that name?
That's not a real group?
Why make up a fictitious group at all? Why not just keep things completely anonymous, keep things vague? Why do you have to make it into there's a group that's kidnapping him rather than an individual? Why not keep that ambiguous, right?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, the dude obviously doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe he thought he was clever by making up a group in his head, and then putting it in this ransom note or in these instructions and say, hey, read this, and maybe it'll throw the feds off, right? They're going to spend a lot of time looking for this group that doesn't exist.
Yeah, so there is one thing. So back during this time, the banking industry was under heavy scrutiny and criticism from the public because they were accused of kind of looking the other way while drug money was being laundered in their banks. But the problem with this is that, from what I read, John Grundhofer's bank was actually one of the better ones. Like, they were training their employees to look out for certain signs that drug money was being laundered, right? So it kind of doesn't make sense that if this was really a group called Parents Against Drugs, that they would want to target John Grundhofer, because he was actually one of the, not him, but his corporation was more focused on looking out for this kind of stuff. He wasn't part of a bank that was sort of looking the other way.
Or so they say.
I guess that's true. So, moving on with our story. With no instruction manual to go by, the abductor forced John to walk with him down a slope into a remote wooded ravine, where a plastic trash bag containing a sleeping bag was waiting. The abductor's obesity and poor physical condition became apparent to John, as he had to stop on at least one occasion to catch his breath from simply walking down the embankment. The abductor then removed the dynamite that was handcuffed to John's wrist, and then bound his wrists with nylon rope, taped his mouth shut, and rolled him into a sleeping bag like a burrito, and instructed him not to move. Once John laid secure and the abductor was confident that he wouldn't be able to escape, he left the area. John, in that moment, while lying alone and helplessly bound and wrapped up in a grungy sleeping bag in the woods, suddenly remembered something that his old baseball coach used to tell him. Advice that wasn't necessarily meant for situations like this, but was applicable nonetheless. If you can dream it, you can do it. With his abductor gone, John saw an opportunity, and being a man who doesn't take things lying down, decided to work on freeing himself. Using all of his might and the nimble moves of his slippery, 5'6" otter-like body, was able to wriggle free from his bindings and out of the nylon burrito he was wrapped in about 20 minutes. So, Kyle, here's a question for you. So, if you were the perpetrator, how would you make this kidnapping setup work better, with like minimal or no additional items? Like, let's say that you're the MacGyver of abductors. You have $20, a sleeping bag, some duct tape, and some nylon rope to work with. How do you not fuck this up?
If you aren't adept at tying knots, you should probably practice tying some knots before engaging in this abducting, for one, to make sure your victim does not wriggle out of your shittily tied nylon rope. Yeah, and then if you have duct tape, right? So yeah, you tape someone's mouth shut so they can't scream for help. That's a piece of duct tape. Or if you're nuts, like 2 wraps around the head, you still have a whole roll of duct tape to wrap around your shittily tied nylon knots to make them even harder to get out of. And I get the dude was out of shape, but I don't know, being a big dude that, you've wrapped up your victim in a sleeping bag, why not keep rolling the bag with tape around it? You could tape him into the bag. You want to talk MacGyver? You give me some duct tape and a couple other items, man, people are not escaping.
Here's what I would do. I would tie his hands kind of like the perpetrator already did, with the nylon rope. But then what I would do is I would like duct tape his forearms together too, so that, even if he gets out of his nylon bindings, he still has duct tape on his forearms that he can't wiggle out of. And then here's a big thing with the $20, not even $20. What I would do is I would buy like one of those little padlock things, and I would just padlock the zipper of the bag together. So even if he gets out of his bindings, he's still trapped in this sleeping bag.
I mean, yeah, I get that. That depends on how loose the sleeping bag is, and it's got to be like a 2-zipper type deal.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, I don't know, man. With the extra $20, I don't know, man. Pack of cigarettes and a 6-pack. You can sit there and watch him try to struggle for like an hour and just laugh your ass off, right? Because you have a whole roll of duct tape. That is all you need.
Well, I think we're getting a little too ahead of ourselves here, and I don't want to give any potential kidnappers ideas. So
you're right. Once free, John looked left, then looked right, and decided to run back up the hill. The abductor had driven off somewhere in John's car. Free at last and finally alone, John seized the opportunity to walk to a nearby dairy farm where he was able to phone the police. The ransom payout was canceled, and the authorities came to John's rescue. John's car, which was missing, was found the next day in a parking structure just 3 blocks away from where he was kidnapped. According to eyewitnesses, the car was dropped off there at about 10 p.m. on the day of the abduction. The bungled abduction ended without resolution. The would-be money extortionist never returned to the scene and vanished like a shadow in the night. At a news conference that same day, Grundhofer stated, quote, "First of all, I'm okay. I have no idea why this took place this morning. Right now, I've got a bank to run. That's what I intend to do. I'm not going to comment further on details except to say thank you for all the concern expressed to me and to my family." End quote. Wow, you fire 1,800 employees and you're not sure why this could have possibly happened to you?
Well, we don't know. But I mean, kind of a trooper if you think about it, because the dude gets kidnapped and he just like returns back to work immediately the same day. You know?
So who's the real wage slave?
I don't know, man. For him, the action is the juice.
I guess.
All right, so that brings us kind of to the end of the story, but we've got to go over some suspects now. As you might imagine, law enforcement immediately set out to find the culprit and bring him to justice for his horrible crime. The authorities described the kidnapper as between the ages of 50 and 60, a well-educated or businessman type, 6'2", 250 pounds with thick, yellow-tinted glasses and a ruddy complexion. At the time of the abduction, he was wearing a suit, tie, and tweed hat and was carrying a satchel. All right, so 6'2" and 250 pounds. That is overweight, but I don't know if that's considered fat these days, is it? I think by 1990 standards, definitely, but
yeah, probably not these days. I mean, I'm like 6'1", 220. I mean, I'm overweight, but I'm not like obese, you know?
Right. Yeah, okay, so I mean, this guy, he was a pretty big guy, so. Working with John, the FBI put together a composite sketch of the suspect, which we are now looking at. How would you describe the figure depicted in the drawing?
Man, you know I'm not good at describing pictures, you know.
I mean, just like Ivan says, use the method of free associations. Does this remind you of anybody or anything?
I don't think it reminds me of anybody, right? You know, he's got that bowl hat on top, right? Glasses. Kind of got big lips, a big nose.
Yeah,
it's got wrinkles around the jawline, you know, maybe not just from age, but maybe, you know, from being out of shape and unhealthy, you know. Actually, kind of looks like a mammy nun, you know, if you think about it. You know, he's got a head like a potato, you know, lips like a duck.
Yeah, he's got these like thick, rubbery looking lips. But anyway, the police were eventually tipped off by 2 people about another man named John who resembled the composite sketch, John Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a maintenance man who lived 25 miles outside of Minneapolis, but aside from the resemblance to the composite drawing, had no apparent connection to John Grundhofer, that is. Henderson cooperated with the FBI's request to search his home and vehicle because, according to him, he had nothing to hide.
Henderson even participated in a suspect lineup, in an attempt to clear himself as a suspect. Unfortunately for Henderson, John Grundhofer ended up fingering him out of the lineup. However, muddying the waters even further, Jeff Rasmussen, the Good Samaritan who witnessed the kidnapping, did not finger Henderson in the lineup. A handwriting analysis also concluded that the words scribbled on the so-called cheat sheet did not match Henderson's personal penmanship. The FBI remained laser-focused on Henderson as the suspect, as they felt that his alibi wasn't airtight and continued to try and dig up any evidence they could find. He even later became the target of a grand jury investigation. After some time, however, they no longer considered him to be a suspect. Grundhofer told the Times newspaper that the incidents gave him a new perspective on life. Quote, "People tell me I have 9 lives and I've used up 6, he told the newspaper. I've lived through too many ups and downs in my life to let anyone or anything get to me. I didn't survive a kidnapping, my daughter's shooting, and a lot of other things in my life to be a quitter."
So real quick, this is something that I didn't put in the outline for tonight's show, but his daughter was a senior at UC Berkeley in 1990, and just it was like 6 weeks before this kidnapping happened. There was some madman who walked into a bar and started terrorizing and shooting people in the bar. And his daughter was one of the victims of the shooting, and she got shot 7 times, but she didn't die. She made a full recovery.
Wow. So she's also not a quitter.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know if I would keep going if I had 7 holes in me.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. Why don't you continue on, though?
But we can't end this episode without throwing out the name of another suspect that sometimes gets tossed around by internet neckbeards and amateur sleuths alike. It goes like this. Perhaps, just perhaps, John Grundhofer kidnapped himself and made the entire story up in order to gain public sympathy. As we stated earlier, his ruthless and cutthroat business management style earned him the scorn of many he dealt with. A polarizing figure, his shareholders would have loved him, but many of those who worked under him despised him. However, if true, would mean that Jeff Rasmussen, the eyewitness, would have had to have either been in on the scheme, or John Grundhofer would have had to have had an unknown accomplice to perform the kidnapping stunt inside the parking garage for this to have worked. Plausible? Perhaps, or perhaps not. But people have done far crazier.
All right, so let's conclude our story here. The story of the abduction of John Grundhofer, though unresolved, serves as a cautionary tale. One man's greed and ruthless pursuit of comically large sums of money can only lead to a single inevitable outcome: a massive trail of metaphorical destruction, along with an untold number of innocent lives forever upended. What exactly causes someone to go through life and operate with such callous disregard for the well-being and livelihoods of their fellow man without so much as a second thought? Perhaps that is a mystery for another day. As for John Grundhofer, however, we're happy to report that he went on to enjoy a highly successful career in the uppermost echelons of the banking industry. Through his savvy business acumen and hyper-focus on cost management, unceremoniously firing dead weight, and eliminating bonuses and employee perks, he heroically saved First Bank Systems Incorporated more than $100 million a year during his tenure as CEO, ultimately earning his shareholders over a 1,000% return before retiring comfortably in 2002. For the next nearly 2 decades, he lived the same way he always had, dedicated to philanthropy, before passing away peacefully in his Indian Wells, California home in January of 2021 at the age of 82. Though he may be gone from this world forever, he will always be remembered in the hearts of all who knew him for being the kind of guy who would give the shirt off his back for anyone, having a smile that could light up a room, and if nothing else, being a pillar of the community. All right, man, are you ready to try and solve this sumbitch once and for all?
Let's do it.
All right, man, so do you have any thoughts about this horrible crime that you'd like to get off your chest?
I have a theory for whodunit.
Tell me your theory, man. I want to hear it.
Nothing specific. I don't know like the exact person, but, thinking of the options, like, was it a disgruntled, recently fired employee? Did John Grundhofer do this himself to drum up sympathy? And why was this guy never identified? Wasn't recognized by anyone?
Unless it was John Henderson.
Yeah, I don't think it was John Henderson. I'll come back to that. I think it was the husband of a recently fired female employee, right? Just someone looking to get revenge, but not like lethal revenge, and maybe not even like financial revenge, but just like, hey, you fired my wife. I think you're an asshole. I'm going to ruin your day. I don't think this guy really intended to collect any ransom. I think he just kind of wanted to put some fear into John Grundhofer, with no real end game except for that. Like maybe he might change his ways and not be such a ruthless corporate snake, probably didn't go that way, but that is my theory. And then as far as John Henderson goes, I watched the interview of him on Unsolved Mysteries, right? And John Grundhofer described him as like a well-educated business type person, right? The kidnapper. But Henderson seemed to struggle to form sentences almost. He didn't seem...
Well, he was a maintenance man. We don't know much about him other than we know that he was a maintenance man. So not a business type.
Yeah, definitely not a business type.
Yeah. So for me, man, I think your theory does hold a lot of water. Maybe this guy didn't intend to collect on the ransom, right? Which would kind of make sense because if you think about it, the kidnapper just left him in the sleeping bag in bindings that would be easy to get out of. It would take some time, but fairly easy for somebody to get out of. And as far as I can tell, the kidnapper never returned to the scene. He just like drove John's car away. And I don't think he would have driven back to the scene, right? Because the car was later found back in Minneapolis, just 3 blocks away from John Grundhofer's office.
Yeah.
Now, what was he going to intend to do? Just leave him there and then like return later that day or something? Like, I don't understand what the end game for this person would have been, because that's what's fucking with me the most. Also, how was the ransom going to be collected? Like, how do you collect a cash ransom like that? You demand a ransom. Like, where are you going to tell them to drop it off? And then wherever you tell them to drop the money off at, they're going to be waiting for you, and they're just going to pop you right there.
What was it on the cheat sheet? I don't know what was on the rest of the cheat sheet.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows because that's not publicly available info. I would love to see what was written on it, but
right. The FBI investigated this. You'd think that they would have a picture or a scan of the cheat sheet. They said they did a handwriting comparison on it. So they do have it somewhere. So yeah, it would be interesting to see exactly what was on the cheat sheet.
I would love to know too, because without knowing what's on that, I feel like we're speculating without knowing all the available information,
Yeah.
Like that's really important to know. So it's like, how was this guy going to collect the ransom money? And then, the other thing is like, why would you ask for $500 bills and $1,000 bills? I have never in my life came across a $500 bill or a $1,000 bill, like ever. Never in the wild.
Yeah. Yeah, I wasn't even sure of their actual existence. If that was just some I
thought it was like an urban legend.
Yeah, or like Hollywood movie money, $1,000 bills.
Yeah, and would he even if you just drop off a bunch of fake $1,000 bills with like Bill Clinton's head on it? I mean, would he know the difference?
Bill Clinton's head.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, the thing that's fucking with me is that the whole plan from the start was so stupid. You're asking for a cash ransom, which it's like, how are you going to collect a cash ransom securely,
Yeah. I mean, there's
unless movies. It's like we're holding John Grundhofer hostage, and if you try to do anything funny, we're going to execute him or something like that. I mean, maybe it was that, but still, it's like, I don't know. It's so stupid and risky, and it just makes no sense. And then the way that he just dumped him in the woods thinking he's not going to be able to get out of his little sleeping bag. It's so ridiculous, man.
Yeah, so that's why I like the idea that, you know, the ransom wasn't the end game. It was just to scare the dude, you know, just to fuck with him, just to, you know, ruin his day like he's ruined so many other people's days by, you know, unceremoniously firing them. Whether they're useful or not, you know, it's it never feels good as the working class to just have, you know, the people above you look at you like a number and just scratch you off the board so that they can make more money, buy bigger cars and bigger yachts.
Yeah, well, for me, I don't see it. It's kind of like what we talked about way back in the DB Cooper episode. I don't know if you remember this, but I just don't think that criminals like this really exist in the real world. It's only like in Hollywood movies where these kinds of people exist, where they want to do this really elaborate, risky scheme, you know, just to send a message or something, right? I think that this guy was intending to carry out the plan as it was written, you know, like I think he had the full intention of collecting the $3 million. I just don't think he was very smart. I think in his head, he was like, oh, I'm going to ask for $500s and $1,000 bills because that's going to be easier for me to carry. Yeah. It's not going to be this giant fucking like treasure chest. I'll be able to carry it across state lines without, you know, having this huge container in my car.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, what's $1 million in 20 bills, like $20 bills supposed to weigh? Like I've seen a couple movies portray it like dude, it's like 100 pounds of paper or something.
I don't know the exact number, but what I can say is that the DB Cooper ransom money was about 20 pounds, I believe. So how many bills is $200,000 in 20s? What's that, like 10,000? So 10,000 bills. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, honestly, but it would be a lot. And it's not necessarily the weight. I think it would be more the bulk that would be the real inconvenience.
I mean, well, think about paper in terms of bulk weight. Like, have you ever picked up a ream of paper, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's pretty heavy.
Yeah. A single ream, you know, that feeds your printer how many times before it runs out. Yeah, that's dude, those things are at least 20 pounds, and they don't take up a ton of room.
Yeah, I don't know who would have done this. Obviously, I can't name a name. I don't think it was John Henderson, though. I think that they just focused in on John Henderson because he vaguely resembled the composite sketch. But one, the guy, John Henderson, wasn't wearing glasses. The composite sketch guy was. And I think if he was wearing thick glasses, you'd be able to tell that there's a prescription there.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the guy's lips, I mean, the lips were similar, but then again, it's like the composite sketch to me just looks like some fat New Yorker who eats a steady diet of pizza and hot dogs, you know? Yeah. Pick anyone off the streets of New York who eats a steady diet of New York street pizza and hot dogs, and it looked very similar to the composite sketch. Just slap a bucket hat on him and a pair of really ugly glasses, and there you go. There's your man.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not super good with identifying facial features. I'd be the worst person to ask to render a composite sketch, but I thought it, you know, looked like John Henderson, but that really seems like the only thing that they had going, right?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, the dude had an alibi, albeit not airtight, and there didn't seem to be much information other than that, you know, but yeah, nothing else really seemed to match up, you know?
Yeah. Well, you got anything else you want to talk about when it comes to this?
I don't think so. I like my theory that, you know, that this was just a stick it to the man kind of thing.
Right before we go, do you think that there might have been another person involved in this? Or do you think that this guy acted by himself?
Considering all of the things that appeared to have gone wrong, I think he acted alone.
I think so too. Yeah, that's where I lean as well.
At the very least, if I had an accomplice, I would like to have them waiting nearby where I stuff this dude in a sleeping bag so that I could take his brand new Mercedes and drive it into a ditch somewhere and get a ride back home. But instead, he drove the Mercedes all the way back to where he picked it up from, essentially. So,
unless he was like intending to leave him in the woods and then sort of pass the baton over to somebody else who was going to come pick John up and take him to some secure location. But kind of don't think that's what happened. But the reason why I bring that up is like, why would he just drive John there, just wrap him up in a sleeping bag, leave him there, and then drive his car away and never come back? Right? Like, what the fuck was that? Because if he came back to the scene, the police are already looking for his car. He would have been popped right there if he had come back.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. I don't get this entire story. It just makes no fucking sense to me. So real quick, if you've enjoyed our show, please leave a rating and review for us on whatever app you listen on, especially if you're on Apple. Please like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and please follow us on Instagram at Super Mystery Bros. Kyle, you got any apologies, shoutouts, or clarifications to make before we go?
Assuming my theory is correct, I'd like to shout out to the bumbling kidnapper for sticking it to the man, for giving an extra stiff middle finger to another greedy corporate fucking snake.
I don't know if I agree with that, but
well, you don't have to.
Well, I kind of like to do the opposite here. I'd like to just give a shout out to the real heroes in society. We talk a lot about soldiers, firemen, doctors, 9/11 first responders, but in my opinion, not nearly enough about the heroes who work in the banking industry, especially in the executive positions. You guys are like modern day Atlas, just bearing the weight of the world on your shoulders, and frankly, you just don't get the appreciation that you deserve. So I'd like to just take a moment to thank you for your service. All right, man, I think it's time to get out of here. Like sands through the hourglass, so too are the minutes of our podcast. But don't fret, dear listener. We'll be back again to breathe new life into an old mystery next time.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there, somewhere in the ether. And through our powers combined, we'll solve that sumbitch once and for all.
This is Super Mystery Bros. The other day, I just went downstairs and I walked to a coffee shop. I was just drinking my coffee. I was listening to the Pixies, because they're one of my favorite bands. And the thought occurred to me, man, I wonder if they're ever going to come to China to play. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to just do a quick search on my phone. And apparently, yeah, they're coming in May. And I was like, holy shit. So I was looking for tickets to go to the show. They're going to play in Shanghai. And, unfortunately the show was sold out and I was like, fuck. So I missed my opportunity, right? Because tickets like these, they sell out within seconds or minutes after they go on the market.
Yeah,
and,
which sucks. It's one of the shitty parts about today, right? People just have bots set up to just fucking mass buy tickets the moment they go on sale. And
yeah, pretty much. And then so I was like, fuck. So anyway, I did some more digging, and apparently there was so much demand for that show that they decided to put on a second show the night after that show. And the tickets were set to go on sale the following day. Like, as in the following day from when I learned about this.
Yeah.
So I was like, holy shit, the universe is lining up. Like, the stars are aligning for me. And Yeah, so I hired somebody to snipe the tickets, and what do you know, man? I got 2 tickets to go to the Pixies. So we're going to go see the Pixies in Shanghai.
So it's still so impossible to buy tickets. You had to hire somebody to snipe tickets.
Yeah, but really, I only paid an extra like $15 to do it.
All right.
But so total, the tickets were like $70 something, somewhere around there.
A
Total.
piece or for the pair?
A piece.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
No, not. I mean, for a band like the Pixies that are that they're not huge,
Legendary.
but they're big
They
enough.
are huge, man.
Yeah, and they've been around long enough. Like you're lucky to get those tickets for less than $100 a hit.
I'm gonna see the Pixies play in China for the first time ever. Like this is the first time they've ever toured here.
Yeah, that's pretty huge.